PA research presentation for Group 12. I apologize in advance to my group members if I mispronounce your last names. It is Faith Lee, Teresa Kwan, Andrew Kafer, Justin Lowe, and Carmen Lamasca. Our research question is, does the amount of hours worked per week have an impact on the grade point average of student? We used a correlation analysis to compare the two means for our statistical research question. Our first peer-reviewed article, source one, the study evaluates the hypothesis that student employment negatively impacts academic performance, e.g. the GPA, only for students primarily oriented toward work rather than school. Using data on student employment, intensity, and motivation, analyzed through a moderation model, the study finds that the negative relationship between hours worked and academic performance exists exclusively for work-oriented students.
Source 2. This study evaluates the effects of student employment on academic performance. In this study, researchers were interested in more than just GPA, as they wanted to see if students working would affect factors such as graduation time, exams passed, and exams attempted. Using data gathered from high school students, utilizing a propensity score matching technique, researchers had found no significant differences in the GPAs of working students, but did find significant difference between the number of hours worked and the likelihood of a student graduating on time. On to source 3, this study evaluates the effects of student employment on academic success in nursing students. In this study, researchers gathered data from 1,014 students across 4 southern United States universities and had found no significant relationship between the number of hours worked and the semester GPA of a student. However, there were significant differences in the type of job work, as healthcare workers had higher GPAs compared to non-healthcare workers, as well as differences in GPA in race and amount of hours a student would sleep. Now on to step 2, hypothesis testing. Right here, we're showing the 6 steps we took, representing our hypotheses, our alpha level that we set, and our decision rules. Here is our null and alternative hypothesis. Our null hypothesis would be there is no significant difference in GPA and number of hours worked per week. Our alternative hypothesis would be that there is a significant difference in GPA and number of hours worked per week.
A correlation analysis is appropriate for the question, does the amount of hours worked per week have an impact on the grade point average GPA of a student? Because it helps examine the relationship between two continuous variables, the number of hours worked per week and the student's GPA. Correlation analysis measures the strength and direction of this relationship, allowing us to understand whether working more hours is associated with a higher or lower GPA, or if no significant relationship exists. This analysis provides a numerical value between -1 and 1, where a positive correlation suggests that as one variable increases, the other tends to increase as well, and a negative correlation suggests the opposite. It is particularly useful for identifying patterns or trends in data and offers a simple method for exploring how these variables might be related. However, it is important to remember that while correlation can highlight a relationship, it does not establish causation, meaning that while the amount of work and GPA might be related, working more hours doesn't necessarily cause a higher or lower GPA. And our third step would be to set the alpha level and run the test. And for our decisions, we will decide to reject the hypothesis if the p-value associated with the observed statistics is less than or equal to 0.05, and we will fail to reject the hypothesis if the p-value associated with the observed statistic is greater than 0.05.
For step 5, we are going to switch to SPSS to demonstrate on how to run the correlation analysis test. So we're going to go ahead and give an example of how to do the correlation analysis on our project. So in order to do that, we're going to go to Analyze. We're going to go to Correlate, Bivariate. And then I already had set up the grade point average, our GPA, as well as the hours of work per week. And then you can also organize this section, which is going to be all of the variables. You can do names and labels. It's easier to do names. and then do it alphabetically. Next, you're going to go to Options, and then you're going to click Means and Standard Deviations and press Continue. And then for this, we're going to go ahead and do the Pearson and two-tailed significance. We're going to press OK. And here is our correlations. Here we have the mean, the standard deviation, and then we also have our significance as well as our correlation right here as well. And all of that will be calculated into our conclusion. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to Graphs. Then we're going to do Scatter/Dot. We're going to click on Simple Scatter, Define. And next, this is going to pop up. So like I said earlier, you can go ahead and organize this by variable names and labels. It's best to do it by names, then alphabetically. So on our y-axis, we're going to go ahead and do hours of work per week, and then our x-axis is going to be GPA. Next, we're going to go ahead and put OK. So as you can see right here, this is going to be our scatter plot. So it doesn't really have a correlation, and all of the dots are going to be all over the place. So what we're going to do to find the line that would correlate our graph together, we're going to double click the graph. And this sends us into the chart editor. Next, we're going to go ahead and do the fit line at total option, which is going to be right here. We're going to press the linear option because we want a linear graph or correlation. Next, we're going to do lines. We're going to do weight. We're going to put that at 3. And then we want a red color. Click Apply. And then this is what our chart is going to look like. As soon as we exit out, it should already be applied to our graph just like this.
Okay, we have a couple of tables here. The first one is about descriptive statistics. It shows the GPA, mean, standard deviation, and the sample size, which is 33. The average GPA in the sample is 3.0352 with a small standard deviation, indicating that the GPAs are relatively close to the mean. We have hours at work per week. On average, students work 5.45 hours per week, with some variation indicated by the standard deviation. The second table, we have correlations, the GPA and hours worked. Pearson correlation coefficient is 0.080, and significance p-value is 0.658. The Pearson correlation coefficient suggests a very weak negative relationship between hours worked per week and GPA. And the p-value is much higher than the alpha level of 0.05, indicating that this relationship is not statistically significant. About the Pearson correlation, this value indicates a very weak negative correlation, meaning that as hours worked per week slightly increase, GPA slightly decreases, but the effect is minimal. A p-value, this is much higher than the alpha level, meaning that the correlation is not statistically significant. We have the scatter plot graph that shows the relationship between these two variables. The x-axis represents the grade point and average GPA of students, and the y, the vertical one, represents the number of hours worked per week by students. Each point on the graph represents an individual data point showing the GPA for a corresponding number of hours worked per week. The distribution of these points gives us an insight into whether there is a pattern or trend between these two variables. In this graph, the points appear to be spread out without a clear upward or downward trend, indicating that there is not a strong linear relationship between GPA and hours worked per week, which could suggest a very weak negative correlation. a week, negative correlation means that as hours worked is slightly increase, GPA is slightly decreases. But this effect is minimal, as I said before. Our Pearson correlation results are the following. Our Pearson correlation coefficient is 0.080. R squared coefficient of determination is 0.0064. For p-value, we have 0.658. F-value and degrees of freedom is not applicable for simple correlation, and typically an F-test is used in the context of ANOVA or multiple regression. Since p-value is greater than the alpha level of 0.05, indicating that the correlation is not statistically significant, therefore we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Then, based on the Pearson correlation analysis, we conclude that the amount of hours worked per week does not have a significant impact on the GPA of students. Then the APA-style results will be, there is a negative correlation between the number of hours worked a week and GPA. R squared is equal to 0.0064, and the p-value is 0.658.
This officially concludes our APA presentation. Thank you for watching.